What if I told you that Iran, the modern-day nation, plays a critical role in the Bible's grand narrative of prophecy and world events? When people think of the Bible, they often focus on regions like Israel, Egypt, and Babylon. But few realize how deeply intertwined Iran, known as Persia in biblical times, was in shaping the destiny of God's chosen people. Iran was not just another powerful empire in ancient history, but a nation named in prophecy to influence key events involving Israel. From the lineage of Noah to the reign of Cyrus the Great, the story of the Iranian people is rich with divine significance. Iran's role in biblical history is surprising and profound. The Bible reveals how God used Persia, a nation ruled by pagan kings, to deliver Israel, rebuild the temple, and fulfill ancient prophecies. In this exploration, we will uncover how Iran fits into the biblical timeline, its rise to power, and how it shaped the Old Testament as well as prophetic visions of the future. By the end, you'll see Iran not just as a modern-day country, but as a key player in God's unfolding plan for the world. To understand Iran's biblical roots, we must go back to the story of Noah. After the Great Flood, Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, became the ancestors of all nations. According to the Table of Nations in Genesis 10, one of Japheth's sons was Madai, the progenitor of the Medes. The Medes later became closely associated with the Persians, together forming the Medo-Persian Empire, one of the most powerful empires in world history. Madai's descendants, the Medes, settled in the region that is now modern-day Iran. Persia, which rose to prominence later, shared this same geographical area and ancestry. Thus, according to the Bible, the ancestors of the Iranians descended from Japheth through Madai. This links the Iranian people to one of the oldest genealogies in the Bible and positions them as a nation involved in pivotal biblical moments from the very beginning of post-flood history. As we fast forward through history, the rise of Persia becomes central to the biblical narrative. The Medes and Persians eventually formed an alliance under the leadership of Cyrus the Great, who founded the Achaemenid Empire, commonly known as the First Persian Empire. At its peak, the Persian Empire stretched from the Indus River in the east to North Africa in the west, encompassing key regions mentioned in the Bible, such as Israel, Babylon, and Egypt. Persia's significance, however, was not just in its military conquests or territorial expansion. Its true importance lay in how God used this empire to fulfill his promises to the Israelites. After the Babylonian Empire, led by King Nebuchadnezzar, conquered Jerusalem in 586 BC, the temple was destroyed, and the people of Judah were taken into exile. The Israelites remained in captivity in Babylon for 70 years, just as the prophet Jeremiah had foretold. Then came Cyrus the Great, the Persian king who conquered Babylon in 539 BC. With his conquest, everything changed for the Israelites. The book of Ezra opens with a decree from Cyrus that allowed the Israelites to return to their homeland and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. This event is recorded in Ezra 1:14, where Cyrus declares that the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth and has appointed me to build a temple for him at Jerusalem in Judah. What makes this moment so astonishing is that Cyrus, a pagan king, had been named over a century earlier by the prophet Isaiah as the one who would restore Israel. Isaiah 4:28 and 45 speak of Cyrus by name, calling him God's shepherd, and even referring to him as God's anointed, a title typically reserved for Israelite kings. God, in his sovereignty, used a foreign king to carry out his divine will. Cyrus's decree to rebuild the temple was not merely a political act, it was a fulfillment of prophecy. Jeremiah had foretold that the Babylonian captivity would last 70 years, Jeremiah 25, 1:12 and 29:10, and Cyrus's rise to power marked the end of that period. Under his leadership, the Israelites, led by figures like Zerubbabel, began to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, taking the first step toward the restoration of their nation. This was more than a historical coincidence. God had used Persia not only to defeat Babylon, the empire that had oppressed Israel, but also to facilitate Israel's rebirth as a nation. This remarkable turn of events demonstrated that God's plan is greater than any one empire, and that He can use even foreign rulers to bring about His purposes. Persia's role in Israel's history reminds us that God's sovereignty extends beyond the borders of Israel, and His plans involve nations across the globe. But Persia's influence didn't stop with Cyrus. Another key biblical moment involving Persia occurs in the book of Esther. During the reign of King Xerxes I, also known as Ahasuerus in the Bible, a plot was devised by Haman, an official in the Persian court, to exterminate the Jews living throughout the Persian Empire. Haman's hatred for the Jews led him to manipulate the king into issuing a decree for their annihilation. However, through divine providence, a Jewish woman named Esther had become the queen of Persia. Encouraged by her cousin Mordecai, Esther took the bold and dangerous step of approaching the king, revealing her Jewish identity, and pleading for the survival of her people. Mordecai's famous words to Esther in Esther 4:14, "Who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this," highlight the critical role she played. Esther's courage resulted in a dramatic reversal. King Xerxes, upon learning of Haman's treachery, ordered his execution and issued a new decree allowing the Jews to defend themselves. This story, recorded in the book of Esther, is commemorated during the Jewish festival of Purim, which celebrates the deliverance of the Jewish people from annihilation. Once again, Persia, though a foreign empire, became the instrument through which God preserved His people. The story of Esther is one of divine protection and providence, showing how God can work through unlikely figures and circumstances to accomplish His will. In this case, the Persian Empire served as the backdrop for the miraculous salvation of the Jewish people from their enemies. The Bible not only recounts Persia's historical role in world events, but also positions Persia, modern-day Iran, as a key player in prophetic visions concerning the future of empires and God's ultimate plan for humanity. Throughout both the Old and New Testaments, Persia is shown not as a peripheral nation, but as one divinely used to shape the course of history, particularly in relation to God's chosen people, Israel. In fact, many of the Bible's prophecies place Persia at the center of significant future events that will affect the destiny of nations. To understand Persia's prominence in biblical prophecy, we must delve into the book of Daniel, which offers some of the clearest revelations concerning the rise and fall of world empires. Daniel, a Jewish prophet during the Babylonian exile, served under the Babylonian and Persian rulers. He was given several visions that revealed the future course of empires, including the emergence and fall of Persia. In Daniel 2, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon dreams of a grand statue composed of different materials, each symbolizing a different empire. The silver chest and arms of the statue represent the Medo-Persian Empire, which succeeded Babylon as the dominant power in the ancient world. This empire, formed from the combined might of the Medes and Persians, was destined to play a crucial role in world history. Later, in Daniel 7, the prophet has a vision of 4 beasts, each representing a successive empire. The second beast, described as a bear raised up on one side, symbolizes the Medo-Persian Empire. The bear's dual nature, one side raised higher than the other, represents the partnership between the Medes and the Persians, with Persia becoming the dominant partner over time. This powerful empire expanded rapidly, particularly under the leadership of Cyrus the Great, altering the course of history in ways that fulfilled earlier prophecies. One of the most profound visions concerning Persia appears in Daniel 8. In this vision, Daniel sees a ram with 2 horns, one representing the Medes and the other the Persians, charging across the landscape and conquering territories far and wide. However, the ram is eventually defeated by a goat with a prominent horn, symbolizing Greece and its king, Alexander the Great. This vision predicted the eventual fall of the Persian Empire at the hands of the Greeks, which was fulfilled when Alexander conquered Persia in the 4th century BC. What is particularly striking about these prophetic visions is the way they demonstrate that Persia's rise and fall were not mere accidents of history. Instead, Persia's ascendancy, conquest of Babylon, and eventual defeat by Greece were all part of God's divine plan. Persia under Cyrus the Great played a crucial role in God's redemptive timeline, particularly by allowing the Jewish people to return to their homeland and rebuild the temple after the Babylonian exile, fulfilling the prophecies of Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. The fall of the Persian Empire to Alexander the Great marked a turning point in history, but Persia's influence continued long after its political dominance faded. By the time of the New Testament, the Persian Empire had been replaced by the Greek and later Roman empires. However, Persia's legacy, particularly in terms of governance, culture, and administration, left a lasting impact on the ancient world. One of the more mysterious connections between Persia and the New Testament is the story of the Magi. These wise men who traveled from the east to visit the newborn Jesus are widely believed by scholars to have come from the region of Persia. It is thought that the Magi were Zoroastrian priests, part of an ancient Persian religious tradition that included astrology and the interpretation of omens. Their journey to Bethlehem to worship the King of the Jews highlights Persia's continued presence in the biblical narrative, even after the fall of the Persian Empire. These Persian scholars recognize the significance of the star that heralded Jesus' birth, further underscoring Persia's enduring spiritual influence. Moreover, Persia's legacy of tolerance and religious freedom would have far-reaching consequences. The Achaemenid Persian Empire was known for its relatively progressive policy of allowing conquered peoples to maintain their religious practices, including the Jewish people. This policy of religious tolerance influenced subsequent empires, including the Roman Empire, which allowed for the spread of both Judaism and later Christianity. In this way, Persia laid the groundwork for the flourishing of Jewish communities throughout the ancient world and, indirectly, for the spread of the gospel. As we examine the role of Persia in the Bible, it is crucial to consider Iran's future in light of biblical prophecy. Many theologians and biblical scholars believe that Iran, ancient Persia, will play a significant role in the end times, as foretold in the prophetic books of the Bible. One of the most prominent prophecies concerning Persia is found in Ezekiel 38-39, where the prophet describes a coalition of nations that will come against Israel in the last days. Among these nations is Persia, which will join forces with Gog of Magog and other allies in a massive conflict, often referred to as the War of Gog and Magog. This prophecy describes a final confrontation between the forces of evil and God's people, with Israel at the center of the conflict. The inclusion of Persia in this coalition of nations suggests that Iran will have a significant role in the geopolitical landscape of the end times. While the exact nature and timing of this prophesied war remain subjects of debate, the presence of Persia in this end-time scenario underscores the continued spiritual and geopolitical importance of Iran in God's divine plan. Additionally, Daniel's prophecies about the rise and fall of empires, including Persia, point to a broader theme of God's sovereignty over the nations. Persia's role in biblical prophecy is a powerful reminder that no empire, no matter how powerful, is outside of God's control. He raises up nations and brings them down according to his divine will and purposes. In light of modern events, especially the ongoing tensions between Iran and Israel, it is essential to view these developments through a biblical lens. These events are part of a larger, divinely orchestrated plan that began in the pages of the Bible and will ultimately culminate in the fulfillment of God's promises. The story of Persia, and by extension, modern-day Iran, is one of the most compelling examples of how God uses nations to accomplish his purposes. From the restoration of Israel under Cyrus the Great to the protection of the Jewish people in the time of Esther, Persia played a pivotal role in biblical history. But its significance goes beyond the past. The prophecies of Daniel, Isaiah, and Ezekiel make it clear that Persia's influence is not over. As we witness modern events in the Middle East unfold, we are reminded that history is not just the story of empires rising and falling. It is the unfolding of God's redemptive plan for humanity.